It was the first such attack in more than a year. A Palestinian suicide bomber blew himself up in the commercial district of a southern Israeli town. The attack on Dimona killed a woman and left several other people injured. A second bomber was shot and killed by Israeli security forces before he could detonate an explosive device. David Chater reports.
The deadly attack in Dimona came in a street full of shops in the old commercial centre of the town when it was crowded with people. One suicide bomber detonated his vest packed with explosives, but a second bomber was shot dead by police when his failed to explode. A lawyer on the scene within seconds, who was giving first aid to the injured, discovered the second bomber lying unconscious and bleeding.
I put his coat out from his body, and then I noticed the explosion belt on him. So I understood that it can explode every second. So I told everybody, go away, it's another terrorist, another explosion can be.
Within minutes, ambulances and police were on the scene, and a security cordon was drawn around the town as terror alert levels were raised throughout southern Israel and in Jerusalem. The Defence Minister, Ehud Barak, visited the scene of the bombing as bystanders vented their anger and shock at the attack. At the cabinet meeting on Sunday, he said there was an immediate need to reinforce the border fence between Egypt and Israel along the Sinai. Defence and security officials had warned resistance groups had sent fighters across the breached border in Gaza and would attempt to launch attacks inside Israel.
The political situation brings about many attacks. I regret that this is the first time in Dimona, and I hope the last time. It proves that our whole country is vulnerable, especially after the events in Gaza.
A cabinet minister from the Shas party, a key part of Ehud Olmert's coalition government, called for a halt in the negotiations aimed at brokering a peace deal between the Israelis and Palestinians by the end of this year.
Unfortunately, we have to stop the negotiations. There cannot be negotiations while there is terror. If they want real peace, they have to stop the terror.
This is the first suicide bombing attack inside Israel for more than a year. Once again, it's in the south of Israel, but security officials fear this could be the start of a prolonged campaign. David Chater, Al Jazeera, Dimona.
The mother of one of the bombers has spoken out. She said her family had been trying to get hold of her son for a number of days.
My son called me and said, "Mother, I am in Egypt. I will come back in a few days." We tried to call him. We have been praying to get a hold of him. This morning my daughter said, "Mom, my brother is not going to come home."
Both the men came from Gaza, one from a group linked to Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. As Jackie Rowland explains, now the Strip is waiting to see what Israel's response will be.
The perpetrators of the Dimona attack deliver their final testimony before going to Israel to kill themselves and take Israeli civilians with them. The men were both in their 20s and from Gaza, but they were not members of Hamas. One came from Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades, the other from the military wing of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. So the attack was carried out by armed groups affiliated, however loosely, to the Palestinian Authority based in Ramallah, not in Gaza.
We announce our full responsibility for the suicide attack in Dimona carried out by the martyr Lu'ay al-Aghwani and the martyr Musa Arafat. It led to the killing and injury of tens of Zionists.
The news is sinking in with Gazans. Some people hail the bombing as a justified response to the Israeli occupation. But others express reservations about the action and are afraid about what retribution Israel may carry out.
The operation was a normal reaction from people who are under siege. There's no food, there's no medicine, there's nothing.
The situation is only going to get worse. We were waiting for things to get better, for the border to open. But this operation will only lead to more pressure on ordinary people.
And all the while, Israel continues its attacks against Palestinian fighters in Gaza. The target this time, a car in the northern town of Beit Lahia. The strike was deadly. One fighter was killed and 3 injured. However, it does not appear directly linked to the Dimona bombing. The Israeli response to that, whatever it may be, has yet to come. Jackie Rowland, Al Jazeera, Gaza.
And we're getting reports that clashes between Palestinians and Egyptian soldiers along the Rafah border have left one person dead and 4 others injured. The military wing of Hamas has asked all journalists to leave the area. We'll bring you more on that as we have it. Now, after a brief lull, fighting between rebels and government troops is raging across Chad's capital for a 3rd day. The rebels had pulled out of N'Djamena, they said, to allow civilians to escape, and many of them have done so. Thousands have fled the city. Now the UN has given its backing for France and other countries to support President Idriss Déby in his efforts to defend his capital. French troops are already protecting hundreds of foreigners at their military base at the city's main airport, from where our correspondent Harun Mutasa reports.
Once families get to this military base, they go through a registration process. They give things like their names and surnames or countries they're from, and they're given a special ID which has a number of them. And from now on until they leave this place, this is how they'll be identified. They then come through this process here, where their baggage is checked. They're split into 2, women and children here, men over there. Now, each of their bags is checked for dangerous weapons, such as knives and guns, if they're carrying anything. This is for the safety of the people here and themselves as well. They then move further back here towards the tent, where they fill out a special form, and this form again is about their details, and it will determine how many people can get into each helicopter. Now, understandably, some of these families who are here have traveled long distances and they're tired, frustrated and hungry, and when they get here they're given some kind of refreshments: water, energy bars, biscuits, orange juice, or something to help them going. Now, the people who evacuated yesterday were taken to Cameroon on Monday morning. Some of them were being taken to Gabon, to the various destinations as to where they're going to. We've been told so far 44 nationalities have been evacuated, and there's still more coming in at the moment. Now, the situation in the capital city has quietened down considerably, but there is still some concern, and we've been told by some of the authorities here that there is a fear that the rebels have threatened to try and take the airport. So it seems now anyone who can get out of the country has come to the space and is being evacuated to places like Cameroon and Gabon. No one knows how long the standoff between the Chadian forces and the rebel groups will last. The average person on the streets hope that it doesn't go on for much too long. They just want this to end, go back to their homes, or if they can, leave the country as safely and as quickly as possible. Harun Mutasa, Al Jazeera, N'Djamena, Chad.
Kofi Annan's efforts to broker a deal between Kenya's rival leaders have hit another setback. His choice of mediator has been rejected by the government. But the former UN Secretary General is pressing on with negotiations in Nairobi to try to bring an end to the post-election violence that's left more than 800 people dead. Speaking to Stephen Cole a little earlier, Yvonne Dege in Nairobi says the government's decision has dealt a heavy blow to Annan.
It's fairly significant. Bear in mind that Kofi Annan has today, Monday, talked about the fact that he actually needs to hand over the leadership of these negotiations to somebody else. He has various other commitments. We all know that he actually spends most of his time in Switzerland with his family. So now the search appears to be on for somebody to be able to take his place when he's out of the country. There is also the issue of the fact that many Kenyans are starting to wonder where these negotiations are going. Over the weekend, President Kibaki, speaking at the African Union summit in Ethiopia, basically said that if the opposition have a beef, if they have a grievance against the government, they should take their issues to the court, which flies in the face of all the mediation that we've seen so far. So it's pretty significant, Stephen.
Yvonne, we've been seeing violence once again over the weekend, and we understand, or at least I've seen reports of fighting still in Western Kenya.
There's a huge amount of fighting in Western Kenya. This particular region is near a town called Kericho, which is the heart of Kenya's tea export industry. Now, the fighting is taking place between people who come from the ethnic community known as Kisi and Kalenjin, who are the ethnic community of the former president of Kenya, Moi. It appears that the security services have been totally unable to contain some of this fighting. We understand that over the weekend, up to 70 people were killed. So it's like different worlds in one place. As the diplomatic negotiations appear to go on, the violence is still spiraling out of control in some parts of the country.
A suicide bomber has killed at least 6 people in the Pakistani city of Rawalpindi, where the army has its headquarters.